So then the bike was ours, and my parents saved the rest of the money, which we were able to buy the bicycle with. And my father, he bought a Ford car during our time at that time, but he couldn't drive a car. He didn't know how to drive. So Mr. Seiler was his teacher. And when he finally received his license, did they have driver's license back then, or certificates or something?
Probably, yes.
Yeah, we visited Clydecroft and Ruidoso, which was green and beautiful and mountainous. But riding with my father was a nightmare. We were only allowed to whisper as passengers in the back seat. So on November 1949, we crossed the Rio Grande River from El Paso to Juarez, Mexico, where proper visas were pre-arranged by the U.S. State Department. So legally, we arrived from Mexico as immigrants. It was called Operation Paperclip.
Right.
Thank you for listening.
I think this will conclude our session.
Yeah, I think she covered most everything.
Oh my gosh, Gisela, you just did a phenomenal job.
Thank you, Gisela. And your parents were Mata and Teo Fulva. And there is a picture I've left in at the end of this. There's a colored picture, and your mother is one of the ones with the ladies standing there. So, and then I think Peter Finzel is on one of the pictures as a child. These last 2 minutes on each slide, so they're to give you an overview of what it was like. But Gisela, your story was wonderful, and the details that really brought it to life. If you're wondering why I'm not participating, I was born there, so I was 1 when we got to Huntsville, Alabama. So you see the group baptism picture. Reiner Klaus's brother, Reiner's here today. Gunter Klaus was in that, and Shanowski, there's Reiner, and Shanowski was another one. I'd like to ask those of you to stand that are children of Von Braun team members, please, because there's...
Yeah.
Hi.
I didn't see all that.
Jody, how cold is that?
He is?
Yeah.
Was that him?
Yeah, in the back, in the blue.
Very good. Now, you're in for another treat.
No. Not like this.
Dr. Klaus Rosinski and Uwe Hütte were partners in crime.
Right. This is true.
At Fort Bliss. And again, they were housed at Fort Bliss, and some of them worked at Fort Bliss. Others were bused daily over to White Sands to do work over there. So it helped me to see it. I went back in 2009, and it gave me a good perspective of what it was like. So, all right, Dr. Klaus Rosinski.
Klaus is fine.
Okay.
Okay, I'll try to make...
Oh, you didn't want me to give you part of your bio?
Oh,
Well, okay. All right.
go ahead.
But you graduated from the University of Alabama with a PhD in chemistry,
Right.
and went on and had a remarkable career with Owens Corning.
Right.
Right. In
But
Ohio,
I'm glad to be retired now.
And his wife Louise is right here at the corner. So she accompanied him, so she'll keep him legal, right? 2 children, 5 grandchildren. Is that right? All right. And Uwe, Klaus Rosinski, and then Uwe Hütte arrived about the same time. They kind of stuck together. They ended up going to the University of Alabama together and roomed together.
Right.
So, but Uwe was born in Schweinemünde, Germany, near Peenemünde, was in Landshut, like all of them were in Landshut in those early years, while the fathers had come ahead and the family stayed behind. So he came to America in 1947, lived in El Paso till 1950. They legally immigrated, and we all moved to Huntsville between March and September of 1950. You went to Tuscaloosa also. You were roommates with Klaus, worked at NASA. You had an amazing career. NASA for over 40 years. And you just recently retired from SAIC.
From Jacobs.
Oh, Jacobs, that's right. SAIC and then Jacobs.
Right.
Okay. So married to Peggy Starnes, and they have 2 children, Stephanie and Sonia. So take it away. Let's hear this.
Okay.
Dr. Klaus
Okay.
and Uwe Hüter.
This is not going to be anything as exciting as what Gisela gave you.
I think you'll need to put it closer.
Closer even than that? Is that? I can't get any closer.
That's good. A lot of folks in here.
All right, but Gisela brought tears to my eyes almost with some of those comments because I was not old enough to experience some of those things that you did in Germany, okay? So she's about 3 years older, even though she looks younger than I am. But Uwe and I are the same age, basically. I think he will tell you he's a little younger.
I'm the younger guy, actually.
But seriously, that was such a good introduction, and so I was going to start in Fort Bliss, but I'll just say a couple of things. I was born in Peenemünde, Germany at the time, and the story goes that my dad was with von Braun flying his plane to look for where the rocket went, and they got a call saying that I was born. So that'll bring tears to everybody. But anyway, to me, honestly, and I think to Uwe, those 3 years we didn't get a lot of the bad stuff. I remember that we might have had. I remember maybe in Peenemünde where we were bombed a little bit. Some of the fireworks there, but that's very, very little of that. So for me, I didn't get all of that kind of stuff that you did. However, I will remember that we also went to the same place to come over to the United States. So went through that same process on the ship. And I was, on a freighter, and the same thing happened. My mom was sick, seasick like crazy. And my sister Anita also. So, but me, I was having the time of my life. So, coming to a free country, I was in great shape there. They gave me oranges, and I was running all over the freighter where they'd let me, and just had a great time. So then we finally, pardon? Closer? Good gosh. I feel like I'm going to eat the microphone. But anyway, I also had a similar, you just brought up some great memories when we came to the United States, just like you did. My dad was waiting there also. And he, I think, thought that the best thing to do, like you said, we couldn't get chocolate. So my dad really came with a whole bunch of chocolate, thinking this was going to be a one-time thing. You get tired of it and not want chocolate all the time. I'm still a chocoholic, and every one of my family is, I think, except Louis. But anyway, so good memories there with that. So then finally we get to El Paso, and for me again, boy, it was just a fun time. We were in the desert. To me, that was the fact that there were fences around us didn't really bother me, and I had my buddy Uwe right across the barrack from me, and we had just a great time. We were running around, and again,
Klaus,
we did have problems.
Klaus,
Go
before
ahead.
we go on these good times, let me back up a little bit and add to the
good.
commentary a little bit. I thought Gisela did a fabulous job talking about the chronological sequence that we went through, and the details were far beyond my memory. But yeah, I was born in Swinemünde, and I do remember the trek going to Landshut, and we went from town to town and kind of tried to escape the bomb raids and stuff like that. We stayed in places that were almost uninhabitable in case, like had lice and stuff like that, and all sorts of strange deals going on that as a kid we kind of lived through it, but my parents suffered pretty much through it, and but we ended up in Landshut, and the funny thing is I thought I remembered Landshut, and I went back in the 70s to the place, and I looked at the town, and I didn't recognize a thing. It's just amazing. I mean, I remember the Isa and playing in the river and all those things, but there's a castle on the hill which I had no clue even existed. So I was just totally shocked at my memory and what the town really looked like. So some of the stuff we say, you'll have to kind of take a grain of salt because the memory gets a little fuzzy over a time period. But yeah, we did come over on the troop ship. We left Bremerhaven on the troop ship, and unlike Klaus, I was sick as a dog most of the time, and since then I haven't been on a boat. Unlike Klaus, who owns boats and stuff like that, our family never did own a boat because
They had a swimming pool. Right?
yeah, it was a traumatic experience for me, but I mean, it was just awful. And I remember one morning we were eating breakfast, and I was just, really green in the gills, and I just barfed all over about 5 or 10 people just across the table, And so to me, the trip over was a one-time experience, and I don't think you'll ever get me on a cruise or anything like that. I understand the ships are a little more stable nowadays, and troop ships were back in the early or the late 40s, but it was quite an experience. And coming by train from New York, I remember my first English word was bubble gum. Somebody had given us candy and bubble gum just stuck with me for some reason. And it was a total new experience for me. And so anyway, we ended up in El Paso, like it was said before, but I think maybe we'll get into some of the little antics that we did. And Gisela mentioned about the fence and the stockade and us being they tried to corral us, but as kids, we kind of found a way out under the fence, dug holes under the fence, and took off in the desert. And there were many times that my parents called the MPs, and they would come out and find us out in the desert. And this was not just a single occasion, but it was multiple occasions that this happened. And I think Klaus and I took a trip across the whole desert to a subdivision at one point. I'll let Klaus tell that because he seems to have a little more detail on those events. I remember the cookies and stuff like that, but
Okay.
I thought it was a friend of Klaus that we went to visit, but apparently we were on a missionary trip to, spread the gospel of the German community. And anyway, Klaus, I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, I mean, I really thought it was Uwe that it was his idea to go under the fence and let's go. There are some houses we could see way in the distance, which was a subdivision, but there was desert the whole way. And so we got some water and we got under the fence and took a hike over there. And I don't know if this lady was out there. Her name was Mrs. Etherton. And she, of course, didn't know us from Adam, wondering what we came out of the desert. And she was watering her flowers or something. She said, my gosh, don't you want to have some water or something? And sure, and cookies. Uwe remembered actually the kind of cookie it was. I can tell you I didn't. But these were what I call most significant emotional events in my life, because what happened after that was we got to know those people. And when I went back again, and they ended up bringing us back to the camp illegally, but my parents were waiting there, and they got to meet the Ethertons, and it turned out that they were very, very nice and accommodating to us, which was kind of a surprise, I guess. I didn't think it was a surprise at all because I was too young, but they gave my sister all kinds of clothes because their daughter was about her age. My mother got all kinds of clothes also from Mrs. Etherton, and Mr. Etherton gave my dad a bunch of stuff. So we were, that relationship continued on, and then one day, they didn't have a son, so I got left out. So one day, when we were allowed to come back out.
Did they not?
I wasn't going to tell that story. But seriously, what happened was they insisted on taking me to El Paso, and they dressed me up with a cowboy suit from bottom to top. Boots, pants, the shirt with pearl buttons, man, and a hat, and a 6-shooter, that, not a real one, obviously, but with the caps, okay, which later became a problem for me because we would have these ramps if you look at those barracks, they all had ramps, and there was a great place to play. And I had the caps in my pocket and slid down there, and I caught fire and burnt my whole leg. So that's why I say some of that was a very significant emotional event for me. All right, well, I'll let Uwe give another example here of what, before I continue. Pardon?
The casino.
The casino.
Yeah,
Oh,
the casino deal.
Yeah,
That's
let
good.
me tell.
We didn't really rehearse this. We just talked a little about it yesterday. We haven't talked about this ever, but...
Yeah, let me tell a little story about what happened. 3 of us, my brother, myself, and another person, his name will go unmentioned right now. I don't think he's in the audience, but the guy, what he did, he kind of borrowed $10, which was a lot of money back in the late 40s, from his parents, unbeknownst to them. And there was a little casino in the far corner of the stockade, or whatever you want to call it, And so the 3 of us decided to go there and try our luck at the slot machines. They had slot machines in there. This was in the post, actually. We didn't have to go outside the fence. And so we spent all the money. Well, somebody saw us, apparently, and reported us to the parents. Well, the parents of this kid says, well, our son, he's an angel. He would never take money, much less gamble it away, Well, he found out that apparently my brother got stuck with being the rat that named him as being the culprit who got the money, So he came by and did a little number on my brother and beat him up a little bit because of that cause. But the thing was never settled. We had a good time, and I think the parents haven't spoken since. Okay.
Well,
what other tale can we tell in El Paso that?
Well, do you want me to tell the one about the money?
Well, you go ahead and tell.
Okay.
I won't plead the 5th on this, by the way.
Well, I hate to admit it, but we were really short on cash. And they did have a PX there, right? But we didn't have any money. So when the soldiers were out doing their maneuvers, Ike, Uwe's brother, and I, and Uwe, even though he may not remember this, would go in the barracks there that were evacuated, and while they were out doing their maneuvers, and we helped ourselves to a little bit of change that they had on their beds, which was clearly not the thing to do. But we got away with it. And so we went back there the next day or several days later to get just a little bit more so that we could buy a couple of Cokes or something at the PX. And guess what? They were waiting on us. And, somebody said they all treated us really good there at Fort Bliss for the most part, but they sure didn't like that. And so Uwe and I ran, and we were a little faster than Ike. And they caught Ike and put his head under the sink with hot water. So that was a significant event for all of us that we'll not forget. And I guarantee you, I've never taken anything since that time. But anyway, that was a tough time. But for the most part, just so you know, we were treated extremely well, as far as I can tell, and I think you would agree, all the soldiers and everybody we came in contact with, you know, we didn't have any problem that I can remember.
Well, yeah, in fact, I would say that in El Paso, but mostly the crowd we ran with were Germans at that time. But there wasn't much of a mixture of any American kids involved. But when we came to Huntsville, we started integrating into the community here. And I think I can honestly say I've never felt any discrimination or anything at all. They integrated us with open arms, and it was really